Yeah, but you know how that goes, Dave,
well,
right? I mean, once you get a tax going,
but that relates to the other side of the equation. Social insurance is a myth. There are no trust funds. There's just confetti paper of $2.7 trillion that we're going to have to levy on taxpayers someday to pay off those so-called assets. Social insurance is a huge myth. Nobody earned their Social Security.
What would you do?
I would radically means test it. I would cut it by a couple of $100 billion. I would reduce the number of people who are affluent, and you know, there's 55 million people getting Social Security or Medicare today. Reduce that dramatically.
Would you grandfather it in? Because a lot of people say no right away.
You can't, because we're broke. You know, when you hear these...
So how do you tell people who say, I've been paying 30, 40 years of Social Security, and
because even if they pay...
bitch is taking it away.
Because I'll be that, SOB, because everyone who is taking it right now after 30 years didn't pay for what they're getting. The payroll tax was never close to what would fund on an actuarial basis.
When do you get it back? It takes 3 years for you to get everything back that you put in over
3 or 4. Medicare
right?
especially. So what I'm saying is, if we get rid of social insurance, radically means test Medicare and Social Security, we can cut hundreds of billions. Then defense, it's crazy, it's $670 billion. Go back to what I call the Eisenhower minimum. $400 billion in today's dollars, inflated dollars, is what Eisenhower said was enough in 1960 when we were up against the Soviet Union. And we should say, these 600,
if it was built up to that point after Iraq and Afghanistan, so we could revert back to the pre-that.
Yeah.
So Republicans don't want to touch that. Democrats don't want to touch the entitlement programs, and here we be.
And then you have Obama saying we need $100 billion of green energy. That's pure boondoggle. We don't need any green energy loans, guarantees, subsidies, all of this nutty stuff that's been going on for solar and electric cars.
Well, what would David Stockman have the government do?
The government ought to provide minimally for the defense and a foreign policy that is non-interventionist and stays out of the affairs of the rest of the world.
You're like a libertarian in that regard.
In that regard, I absolutely am. Look at the last 40 years. Everything has been a fiasco. Vietnam, are you kidding? Afghanistan, what are we doing there after 10 years? Iraq was a total waste of lives and treasure. So the point is, the military-industrial complex is part of the problem, and it needs to be shrunk. And social insurance, supported by organized labor and the liberals, is the other side of the spending problem, and it needs to be radically changed. And if we don't get at the military-industrial complex and social insurance, we're kidding ourselves. The budget is just going to roll on. The deficits are going to grow.
And then what? Because as much as I admire at least some of your gutsy stands, I don't agree with them all. I don't see anything being done. So then what happens?
Well, I think that's why I say the budget is a doomsday machine. We're facing a permanent fiscal cliff of this 8% of GDP gap. I don't see it shrinking easily. I see a constant political battle. Every year there's going to be a debt ceiling crisis. Every few months there's going to be...
What do you think of this, taking it out of the Congress's hand, having the president just raise it?
Well, you know, you can't have a dictatorship. You basically are going to have a bad blow-up in the financial markets.
You think that's coming?
Yes, I do, because when I blame Bernanke more than anybody else for this whole mess.
Providing the easy money.
When he says you can borrow money for 3 years to pay the federal deficit at 30 basis points, that's a rounding error. To Congress, that's zero. Why is anybody going to stand up to social insurance, the military-industrial complex, the ag subsidies, which are ridiculous, this bill, the $60 billion boondoggle they passed for Sandy relief? Who's going to stand up to that stuff when the great man in the Eccles building, which happens to be where the Fed is located, says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I'll keep the interest rate at rock bottom. I'll print the money. I'll buy the bonds. Until we have a house cleaning in the Fed, until we get rid of these lunatics who want to have interest rates at zero, nothing is going to happen on the budget.
All right. Well, you've already hit my appetite, which probably was your intention. But good stuff to think about. Although we don't do it, do we?
Nope.
David Stockman, one of the smartest budget guys I've ever known. Of course, I haven't known that many. Seriously, very good seeing you.
Good to be here.